Hello everybody and welcome to the final session of the Something Green Wedding Fair hosted by North London Waste Authority. I'm very surprised it's the last session of the 2 days. It seems to have gone by in a total flash. But for our final session, we were joined by Rachel, who opened things with us yesterday. And hopefully we won't be plagued by as many tech dramas as we had when I spoke to you yesterday. Thank you for coming back.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me again.
How was your Sunday in between speaking to us?
Yes, lovely, thank you. A bit drizzly today, but got out for a good walk yesterday afternoon. So
today is a little bit grimmer, isn't it? It's a rainy Sunday. Well, today you've come back to talk to us more specifically on those points around reuse and recycling at weddings. So how can people make sure that, you know, the stuff that they're buying isn't ending up in the bin? And if you've got any top tips for things that people can think about in that planning stage as to how they can reduce their waste. And then if you want to go and find out more about wedding planning and that kind of earlier part, then go onto our Instagram or our Facebook and you can find the session that me and Rachel did yesterday morning. But on to reduction and recycling. So what do people need to think about when you're looking at, you know, how to reduce waste and how to recycle things at weddings?
So I think obviously it all begins at the very start of the planning. And I think when you're thinking about, it's mostly probably the decor side of things that often ends up in the bin. I think it's just planning to use things that can be reused for a start, and also then making a plan for how that's actually going to happen. So I quite often find that decor-wise, a really great way to kind of implement this is to use sort of bigger, more impactful pieces rather than lots of little things that inevitably end up in the bin. So, you know, things like big ceremony backdrops, which can then be reused later in the, you know, for the reception in the evening. You know, have clients that hire neon signs, things like that, that really, you know, it's one big thing that creates an impact and is, you know, isn't going to just end up in the bin at the end of the night. So, for example, for my own wedding, I actually had a neon sign made, and the plan is that then when we're going to move house soon, that will be kind of a piece in our house. And I think that's such a great idea for couples because not only is it less wasteful, but also it's just, you know, something beautiful that is a reminder of your wedding day. And I think broadly couples, there's sort of two ways round. There's that way round where people have these beautiful things for their wedding and then find a place for it at home and it's an amazing memento. Or also sometimes couples think about what they actually already have that they could use at the wedding. So, you know, even things like sort of small pieces of furniture that, you know, lamps and things, that creating a kind of stylish decor that isn't just, you know, paper things or plastic things that end up being damaged and, you know, going to waste at the end of the day.
Yeah, which I suppose also makes sense for people, you know, if they want to stick to a budget or if they want to make sure that, you know, they have something they can remember, then either using stuff you already have or something that maybe you wanted anyway in your house and now you've got a chance to buy it is maybe a good time to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. Sort of. So the neon signs are a brilliant example of that. You know, there's no way I could justify getting that just for our house, but when it's kind of, you know, a big piece for the wedding and then keeping it afterwards. Yeah, exactly. I
What does
think.
the sign say? I'm curious.
So it's our new name. So it says Harrison Duns, which is our two names together. So
Beautiful. And that can
yeah.
go up somewhere in your house. Yeah, I really like that. Little pieces that people can think about. I also thought about things like rugs and, you know, all of those kinds of things that you can use to just bring a bit of colour into a space that actually, you know, somebody might have up in their attic that you might be able to put out for the day rather than having to buy loads of new stuff.
Exactly. And I think, you know, the same rules apply for weddings as when you're kind of doing up your home on either on a budget or, you know, you use things like Facebook Marketplace and Gumtree, and you can buy really quite reasonable things that you can, you know, sometimes they'll need upcycling. Sometimes, like you mentioned, rugs, you know, you'll get a bargain just because it's something people are getting rid of. And actually, again, that's brilliant because you're not buying new things. It's things that have already had a life and you're, you know, giving them another lease of life, rather than creating new things.
And what are the kind of things people can think about, I guess, in the end of the night? So when you were talking about that recycling bit, what are the kind of questions people need to ask their vendors and themselves when they're doing that planning bit?
So I think really it's just having someone that's responsible for, you know, when the clear down happens. So yeah, that could be the venue staff, or it might be if you have particular vendors, for example. You know, something that I often find myself doing at the end of the night, packing everything up to make sure nothing goes in the bin that shouldn't. Um, because I think, like I did mention yesterday, you know, people have been drinking, people are tired, and people just want the clear up done. And if that means just chucking everything in a bin bag, that's what they'll do. So I think it's just really in the planning stages, having a clear idea of the things that you do want to hold on to. And, you know, obviously with things that are bigger, you know, like signs or backdrops, that's obviously easier and more clear. But, you know, if you have little decorations on the table that you want to keep, it's basically just making sure someone's responsible for actually making sure they're kept. And you know, it also goes for things like, for example, lots of couples with the alcohol they buy for the wedding
Mm-hmm.
might buy it on a sale or return basis, which is great for, again, reducing waste. But obviously, it needs someone to be packing that up, and you know, companies have rules about the labels have to be intact, or you know, it needs to be boxed back up. So yeah, just pinning the responsibility on someone or a few people, and explaining clearly what it is you actually want to happen with everything.
And is that ever something that you've seen? I mean, you know, I know you mentioned that you said you could, you know, pick your one person, your, you know, soberish friend who can go around at the end and clean everything up. Have you ever been to a wedding where there's that kind of joint responsibility? Because I'm imagining what you could do is, you know, have a big box in the corner and let everyone know during the speeches that at the end of the night, we've all got to do something to put it in a box at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's often a really nice touch at weddings. You know, you kind of see it during the day, for example, when you know, to reduce waste. It's sort of, you know, you have one set of chairs, and the chairs get taken from the ceremony to the marquee. And you know, many hands make light work. You ask everyone to do it, and then it's done in minutes because you know everyone grabs one or two chairs and it's sorted. And I think exactly the same thing applies at the end of the evening, when yeah, you ask people to help, and if everyone pitches in, it's done very quickly. I think it's just key to have someone that's in charge of that, because you know, otherwise,
Herding people to,
yeah,
to the right
because
space.
I think otherwise, yeah, exactly, trying to yeah, herding cats is is a good good way to describe guests at a wedding at the end of the night. So
What are some of the things that people might not have thought about, in terms of what might cause waste at a wedding? Because I think things like, you know, people might often think about food and, you know, making sure that they've got enough for everybody, but not so much that loads gets thrown in the bin. But I'm sure that there are loads of other things, you know, in the planning and in the actual day that might end up going to waste.
yeah, so I think often a big one is the sort of paper goods. So you know, people might have printed menus for the table and place cards, and the orders of service. And I often find when I'm clearing up, there's just, you know, hundreds of it. You're just clearing clearing paper into bags. And obviously, you know, paper's not the end of the world. It's better than plastic, but it is a shame to, you know, spend all this money printing all these beautiful things that then just kind of end up being cleared away. Because let's face it, guests never, they don't even take things that they're meant to take, like you know, favors that are intended for them to take. So the idea of them actually kind of, you know, collecting together their orders of service to take home is just, it just doesn't happen. So you know, things that you can do instead is I've seen, you know, people might use their napkins and kind of get names printed onto those instead of having a separate place card.
Mm-hmm.
Because then, you know, the napkin's a nice keepsake, but as discussed, often people will leave them behind. But at least it's also served another purpose of being the napkin. You know, it's not just bits of paper that kind of get left.
Yeah,
Um,
I
and I
hadn't thought about the fact that people might, you know, not take the things that they're supposed to take in terms of, you know, of their own stuff, but also the favors and all of the rest of it. Do you have any tips for, you know, what to do if you end up with loads left over because people have, for whatever reason, not been in a state to take them home?
So I think, I mean, often favors are kind of things that are, you know, long life anyway. And I guess, again, it's just making sure that the ones that get left do get kind of collected up by someone, because you can always give them to guests afterwards. You know, it's quite a nice thing. You know, if they're not bulky, you might want to post it out with your thank yous, or, you know, it might just be that you're having a chat with a friend and they say, oh, I left it behind, and, you know, then you can give it to them. Just as long as it's not already in the bin. And I think sometimes, you know, often people will put favors on the dining table, which is great and it's lovely and it's a talking point for when people sit down. But actually, really, I think with favors, the way to get them home with people is to, you know, have a sort of station at the end of the night and potentially someone actually giving them out. You know, sort
As
of good.
people leave, put them in
Yeah,
their hands.
exactly. Because people put stuff down and they don't pick them back up again otherwise.
Yeah, also people might not have bags, or, you know, might not have
Yeah.
pockets if everything's in a different room. So I can see that being a much better way of getting it straight to where it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think before weddings, I used to work in fundraising events where quite often there were goodie bags. And at the end of the night, you would look under the tables and it would just be, you know, so many
Full.
left. So yeah, even when you literally give people a bag to take stuff in, it still gets left behind.
And you were speaking about, you know, making sure that you have this person, or, you know, talking to the venue and seeing what they can do for you. And I was wondering what venues' attitudes or vendors' attitudes generally are to helping, because I imagine, you know, they're also really tired and have been working all day, and have had to think about a million other things. So how much can you ask of your venues and your vendors, and how much should you be doing yourself?
So I think it massively varies between venues and suppliers. So in terms of venues, I quite often find, you know, there'll be the venues that I work at as an on the day coordinator, and they're almost like, you know, why are you even here? Because we're, you know, already covering so much. And other venues where they're literally, you know, it's turnkey. They're opening the door and they're locking up at the end of the night, and they're not doing anything in between. But I think that, and the same with caterers. You know, some of them will expect to lay all the tables beforehand and do all the clearing up afterwards, and some of them are there literally to serve the food. Um, so I think really it's just expectations. I think as long as you have the conversation well in advance about whether people are prepared to do those kind of things at the end of the night or not, then you know, and then you know whether you need to get some additional help to cover that or not, or whether it will be covered by the people you're already, you know, you've already booked.
That's a good way. I think you just have to ask the question, don't you, and see what people's response is. I'm aware that we're about halfway through our time. So if any of you guys watching have any questions for Rachel about the kind of waste aspect of things or the planning aspect of things, if you're in the middle of a panic about planning your wedding, this is the place to ask all of your questions. So just drop them in the chat and I can go through them as they come in. The waste and recycling thing is an interesting one because it's not like a sexy part of talking about weddings. Like, I think people want to talk about the flowers and the dress and this kind of admin side of a wedding. I imagine a lot of people maybe don't think about until it's too late.
Yeah, I do agree. I think one of the ways it does feed quite nicely into what people are interested in is quite often it can also be a money saving thing. So one of the things that I think is a massive money saver, and it's a massive sort of sustainability element, is reusing things sort of through the course of the day. So I just always think it's such a shame when people have these beautiful floral arrangements for the ceremony, and then that's it. You know, they've been seen for half an hour during the ceremony, and then that's it. Whereas, you know, if you have, for example, sort of a ceremony backdrop that you can then reuse as a backdrop, you know, either in the dining sort of element of the reception or as a backdrop in the evening, um, you know, it's just kind of reusing things throughout the day. So actually, you're getting a whole day's worth out of it rather than just, you know, half an hour or whatever.
So make sure that you take your flowers from your ceremony straight over to the next bit.
Exactly, yeah. And I think, again, it always comes back to just having a plan. As long as you've planned to do that and you've asked someone, someone to be responsible for it. Often the weddings that I'm involved with, it will be the ushers, the poor ushers are the ones, carrying these big milk churns of flowers or whatever from the church to the reception. But as long as people know that that's the plan, then it does just happen, and it's quite straightforward. And I think we mentioned yesterday about having sort of a flower bar to distribute flowers at the end of the evening or the following day. But I think with things like flowers, it's just as important to kind of reuse them throughout the day as it is to try and extend their life beyond the wedding day.
Absolutely. So everything is just about having a plan. And how far do you think people should start? Let me rephrase that question. It didn't come out as I intended it. How far ahead should people be thinking about this kind of stuff? Because there are some people who will be planning their wedding 2 years in advance, and there are some people who will have just suddenly realized it's in a month's time and they should start booking some things. So what's your ideal time frame?
So I think in terms of planning a wedding generally, you can plan in any time frame. It's just that obviously the choices that you have become limited, the shorter time frame you have. So for example, with booking suppliers, there'll be suppliers that get booked up, a couple of years ahead, whereas you might be lucky and kind of snag the person that you want just a few months before, especially if it's, a weekday wedding or it's out of the kind of more popular months. And again, you might just be lucky, even if it is a peak date or whatever. So I think in terms of securing suppliers, the earlier the better. And then I think in terms of making these sort of green choices, that kind of has to happen. It's much easier if it happens from the very beginning. So
Mm-hmm.
with everyone that you book and every sort of choice you make, you're thinking about it then, rather than kind of planning everything, booking everything, and then suddenly thinking, oh, hang on, how are we going to make this less wasteful? Going back to the example of the flowers and using them for the ceremony and then the reception, that's something that's going to come up when you're booking a florist and talking to them about what it is you actually want. And good suppliers will also be thinking about these things and will mention them and say, oh, have you thought about how you could reuse? I think there's a bit of a misconception out there about the wedding industry as a whole and this kind of money making machine, which just isn't true in many cases. Most suppliers care about their clients getting value for money. They're going to want you to not waste money by having 2 sets of flowers when you could just have one, or in that example. So yeah, I think it just has to feed into everything that you're kind of thinking about and planning and booking. And if you get the right suppliers, they'll be on it as well.
They'll do it for you.
Yes, exactly.
And I guess that's one of the benefits of going to a smaller supplier or speaking to somebody local, is that they'll probably be able to give you a little bit more insight. You'll be able to have a chat before you actually go ahead and book anything. I feel like I've just made about 200 contacts from this wedding fair of people who I could just call and say, I just have a question about, and they'd probably be very happy to sit and chat to you about it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. When you book suppliers, they will often, obviously, every wedding they do, they will have worked with other people, and they'll have ideas. I think any supplier that you book and talk to, they'll be able to, if it's a photographer, they'll be able to recommend a florist, a planner, a videographer. Your suppliers, if you find someone that you like and you get on with and you trust, then it's really easy to ask them for recommendations, and then it kind of goes from there. And I think often, suppliers, they'll find people that they love working with, and so then when they work with them again at a wedding, it's brilliant for them as well. So they create an even better, environment for the client, for the couple.
Got a chain reaction of different people coming together. Somebody's just asked a question in the chat about hiring, which it would be good to talk about anyway, but whether it's easy to hire cutlery and crockery, and I guess that depends on the venue where you're at and if those get supplied or if you're doing at home.
Yeah, so there are loads and loads of companies that do hire tableware. I think the thing that I found, I actually we rescheduled our wedding for next year after it was meant to take place in 2020, but hopefully keeping fingers crossed for
Keeping
2022.
my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you. But anyway, the reason I mention it is because unfortunately the company that we were hiring our tableware from have gone into administration, and so I've kind of starting from scratch. And there are so many companies out there. I think the slight difficulty is if you're looking for something a bit different. Like there are loads of event companies that hire your kind of basic,
Mm-hmm.
white plates and normal steel cutlery and all of that stuff. But you kind of have to look a bit harder if you're looking for something specific and special. And like you touched on, it really depends on your venue, because obviously if you're getting married at a hotel or often a sort of specific wedding venue, they will have their own stuff in house, especially if you're not getting an outside caterer in, the catering's done in house. But quite often, again, it's another thing that you should talk to your caterer about, because it might be that actually there's someone they always use, and they might even take it out of your hands completely. You're paying them to deliver the job as a whole, and hiring the cutlery and the crockery is their problem. So yeah, it kind of depends on the situation, but hiring is easy, and the great thing about it is most companies, you send things back dirty. So
I was literally just about to ask that. I was thinking, if you're having like a wedding at home, or in a field or whatever, where you might not be able to wash up 40 plates.
yeah,
What
yeah,
do you do?
exactly. Yeah, and I think quite often one of the things I get quite often is people who want to source from charity shops or car boot sales to get tableware, particularly glasses, which is brilliant. But you just have to bear in mind that once you get up to a certain number, you're going to have to wash all of that. Whereas if you're hiring, it gets chucked back in the crate that it came from, and it gets sent off, and you don't have to think about it anymore.
3 days later, when you find the crusted plates.
Yeah. You've done your 40th load in the dishwasher.
That's where you need the collective group spirit of
Yeah.
everyone must wash up a plate.
Yeah, exactly.
But I guess that's why hiring is a better option, that you can send it back to them and not have to worry about it. And hiring, I assume, is not just crockery and cutlery, but you can hire everything from teeny tiny decorations to massive pieces.
Yeah, exactly. There's companies that you can hire furniture from, and that's kind of the seating and the tables for dinner. Obviously, that's lots of tables and chairs potentially, but also smaller kind of collections, like sort of sofa areas or pallet seating if you're having a more kind of outdoorsy wedding. I mean, if you can think of it, you can probably hire it.
The sky is the limit.
Exactly.
And I think it's something people might not traditionally think about. I think more and more people are starting to get onto that second-hand idea of going and rummaging around charity shops and car boot sales to find what they're looking for. But hiring is super common in events, and I think something that people maybe don't make as much use of as they could.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I say, it's brilliant that people are kind of making use of this second-hand stuff. But my sort of personal sort of advice is always maybe do that for the things that you don't need hundreds of. And if it's just sort of little pieces of furniture or decor, then sourcing that from car boot sales, great. But if you need 200 champagne flutes, again, it can be done. They're going to be mismatched, but it can be done. But maybe think about hiring and just taking the headache away from that.
There's also a question of, what do you do with 200 champagne flutes when when the wedding is over? Because that's a lot to store.
Exactly. And I think so there are some brilliant websites where you can sell things that you've sourced for your wedding. And obviously then for the people that are buying, they're not spending 12 months trawling around car boot sales looking for 150 champagne flutes. I've actually seen adverts on there where people are saying, I've done all this hard work. It was great. I'm glad I did it, but it was a lot of work, and I can save you all that time.
I don't wish it upon you.
Yeah, buy mine instead.
I love it. So there you go. Rent your champagne flutes or buy them from somebody who's already done the hard work for you. If people want to find out a little bit more about your process that you go through with couples and wedding planning more generally, where can they go and find out about you?
So on Instagram, I am Capston Second, which is CAPSTON, and then the word second. And my website is just capstonsecond.co.uk. So all of the kind of contact details are on there. And I'm always happy to, have a no obligation chat with people. I think sometimes people are a bit nervous about kind of even approaching a planner in case, we say we're going to take over everything and it's going to cost £1 million. But, everything's really flexible and bespoke. And often I have sessions with couples where we literally will meet for 2 hours virtually at the moment, and go through any problems they're having, but then that's it. That's all the help they need. They've got everything else covered. So yeah, I would recommend that if anyone's struggling, don't just painfully struggle on alone. There are obviously me and loads of other people similar who will offer really bespoke help. And yeah, won't take over your whole wedding.
Which leads us nicely into a competition people can win, where you give them one of these planning sessions.
Yes.
So we're running a competition with North London Waste Authority, and the top prize is a 2-hour session. 2-hour session?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
With Rachel to do that kind of troubleshooting, early wedding planning conversation. So if you live in North London and you're planning your wedding at the moment, and you think that actually speaking to somebody who has all of Rachel's expertise, who can help you get through some of those issues, would be right for you, then enter the competition. You can also win a grazing box, which we saw earlier on one of the lives, and it looked incredible, like lots of English cheeses and charcuterie and all kinds of other incredible things. And you can win some homemade soaps as well. So if you're in one of the North London boroughs, I would recommend that you head to the NLWA website and register for that immediately. And other than that, I think that's all we've got time for the Something Green virtual wedding fair. It's been an absolute blast, and I just wanted to say thank you so much to all the vendors, all the suppliers, all of the people who have come to speak to us. It's been such an inspirational couple of days to meet so many small businesses doing so many incredible things. All of these lives are going to be up on Facebook and up on Instagram, so even if you've missed them, you can come and watch them afterwards. If you have any questions for me or any of the team, then just comment them underneath and we'll do our best to get back to you. And I hope you have a lovely Sunday.